Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, so much to get to on the show. Of course, Matt Ryan headed to Indianapolis. Saw the picture of him getting on the jet today, headed to Indianapolis. Also, Dave Archer, Falcons Radio Network, former Falcons quarterback, will join us. What does that mean, Matt Ryan leaving the Falcons, and what do they even expect with Marcus Mariota at the helm? So we'll talk to Dave Archer about that. Danny Reed, voice of the Georgia Southern Eagles, will join us as Georgia Southern begins spring practice. We'll get some what to look for. A lot of new faces, a lot of new things happening there in Statesboro. Danny Reed will join us coming up here in hour number 1. Also, Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, will join us a couple of weeks out from the Masters. And Justin Toscano, AJC.com, new beat writer for the Atlanta Braves there with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He will join us coming up. Braves down at spring training today, beating the Twins at last check, so playing fairly well. And Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast with spring practices opening all across the SEC. We'll talk some SEC football with him. But fellas, Matt Ryan to Indianapolis, currently 8th in the NFL history with 59,735 yards. So his first regular season game. If he has a good game, probably going to go over the 60,000 yard mark, 9th in career passing touchdowns in the National Football League at 2016 MVP, NFL Offensive MVP, Rookie of the Year, first team All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowler, got his team to the Super Bowl. He's done a little bit of everything in Atlanta, as we said, but the era has moved on. I think a lot of people now looking at the post-Matt Ryan era saying, obviously he's the best quarterback they've ever had. Is he a Hall of Fame potential quarterback in the National Football League? Because it seems like while he was in Atlanta, people kind of downplayed what he did in Atlanta, and we're saying the Falcons could always do better, potentially. Then seems like there was the pro defend Matt Ryan can't bend, and the Matt Ryan is good, but you could do better.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good for those detractors of a Matt Ryan. No matter what he does, Kevin, they're going to always say he underachieved. Okay, 14 years, 14 drafts, Super Bowl appearance, regular season MVP, first team All-Pro, Offensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, going to go over 60, going to probably end up, when his career is over, going to probably be right at 70,000 yards. Okay. When you start talking about 70,000 career yards, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 people. Who are those 4 people? Yes, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre. When Matty Ice first got drafted in 2008, did anybody think his name would even be in the same realm as those guys? I'm talking about, Drew Brees, 80,000. I can safely say that him and Tom Brady gonna be the only two in the 80,000 mark. But if Matty Ice ends up with more yards than Peyton Manning or Brett Favre, what else do he need to do? Because at a certain point, what you mean to your franchise, what you mean to the position, how you play the position, and BJ, and maybe Matty Ice might be the exception to the rule, because we have this thing of, can you talk about a certain position without a player? Sometimes you can't, and they still are a Hall of Famer, right? So I think that Matty Ice is one of those guys, you say to yourself, where was the history with Atlanta before he got there? There wasn't one. Yeah, they made a Super Bowl. There wasn't no history. Where was the history at the quarterback position? Even more like, nothing. Now, when people start saying, what about Atlanta? Matty Ice. Because what Matty Ice did, he did these things while Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers were in the league. So I always say this, at his height, what is he? He's a regular season MVP. With Tom Brady? Yep. Drew Brees? Yep. Most guys at their height, at Drew Brees' height, he won a Super Bowl. He never got no regular season MVP, and he has 80,000 yards. So the yards can't just be the only barometer. But BJ, when you start looking at his track record, when you start looking at the resume, what else do we need? Now, Kevin, I know I'm going to say this. If the barometer is Super Bowls, Dan Marino ain't in there. But he is. A Super Bowl is a team effort, Trent Dilfer. Right? I mean, I just think that Nick Foles, Joe Flacco, that's a team, because the team around you has to matter, right? So I do think that when we look at Matty Ice, we've grown up Atlanta Falcons fans, and sometimes I can't separate the player from the history of the team. There was no history before him. You had exciting Michael Vick, You had Dirty Bird, Jamal Anderson, and you had Eugene Robinson not making the Super Bowl.
The Chris Chandler.
The Chris Chandler year. So, and you got Deion. I'm not saying you ain't had no great moments, because you have. Man, every year since 2008, people start saying, dude, Atlanta ain't going to make the playoffs because they got Matty Ice. They're not taking away Julio. They're not taking away, Tony Gonzalez. And that's not taking away guys like Michael Burnett Turner and, so on and so forth. But BJ and Kevin, when we start thinking about certain teams, good teams have one thing in common: not a good defense, not a good running game, not even sometimes a good coach. Got good quarterback play. Sometimes great quarterback play. And I think, to me, Matty Ice, right now, he's top 10. And BJ, I know when it's all said and done, but right now, he is top 10. And the guys that he going to probably be in the same breath with, Brett Favre, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady. If that's not a Hall of Famer, I don't think they exist.
Yeah, it's a remarkable resume to reflect on. It really is. When you think about the consistency, Christian was saying, 10 straight years of 4,000 yards or more. You're thinking about an MVP in an era where you had Manning, Brady, Breeze, etc. You're talking about being a consistent participant in the postseason for a franchise, as you used to talk about, Kevin, early in your radio career, that it never had back-to-back winning seasons. There is just so much to reflect on with what he accomplished in Atlanta. I think the question that's being asked now, and we've seen, social media posts and blogs and shows all over the place saying, is he a Hall of Famer right now? I think that is a fascinating question. Because just being honest, my visceral initial thought, and I'm not saying this is right or fair, but just my first thought, and I've gone back and forth on this, but I think my first thought is not quite yet. But then when you go inside the numbers, I mean, you don't always just kind of take your first thought and go with it. You go look at the numbers, you look at the resume, you look at the production, you look at the proficiency. He's in the top 10 in the history of the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns. He's won an MVP. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's helped elevate the status quo of a franchise to national relevance, to where there are expectations in terms of what might he do. I mean, could another 4,000-yard season do it? Could another playoff win do it? Could he be in now? I've gone back and forth on this. I really have, and it's tough because the conversations we've had, Ben and Kevin, over the years, one of the criteria we've tried to stick to, because it's hard to be consistent, is we've asked, can you tell the story of the position without the player? And we've always said, if you can, maybe they're not a Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how Matt Ryan fits into that, because as Kevin said, if you, I would guess, ask football fans right now around the country, hey, talk about your top 3 or 4 quarterbacks from the last decade. Mm-hmm. I don't know that Matt Ryan's going to be the first reference, but just because you play with other Hall of Famers mm-hmm. doesn't mean that you're not a Hall of Famer, right? Because you can have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Hall of Fame players in one position in one era. So it's a lot to process. I expect him to have success, Kevin, in Indianapolis. I think he's going to get the Colts into the postseason. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to have more yards, more touchdowns. End of the day, I think he gets in the Hall of Fame, and I think that'll be right. Right this second, if you were to come out and say, I'm done, I think it would be close. I think it would be close. And I'm having a hard time kind of explaining why. You hate to say it's because of
Hall of the Very Good.
Well, but Kevin, you hate to say it's because of, one 30-second, sequence in the Super Bowl, if you had a Super Bowl right now. But it's a lot to process. Maybe it's just so fresh in the mind, it's hard to have clarity. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a fascinating conversation.
I just think that sometimes too, I mean, we don't appreciate consistency as much as we say.
You're right.
Like people say, I get sick and tired of Alabama doing what they do. You know how hard it is to do that? They make it look easy, but look at the infrastructure. Look at what they've built. Matty Ice, all he knows is being consistent, no matter who you give him. Matty Ice in 2021 had a rookie tight end. He did not have a number 1 receiver. He didn't even have a number 2. His best receiver was also his best running back. Did he complain? No. When I started looking at the guys on this list, they played a lot longer than Matty Ice has up until this point. He's already close to 60,000. Matty Ice is going to be at 70,000 yards and far less time than some of these other guys did. Drew Brees played 20 years. Matty Ice is going into the year, 15? Very, very efficient.
But can I ask you this? Because this is where I struggle a little bit, Kevin. And you said Hall of very good. Again, I think he's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. I think that'll be the right call. Right this second, though, because I know you and I have talked about this. Phillip Rivers, I know you have said in the past, I don't know if you changed your mind, that probably not quite, maybe not. He's kind of right there on the edge. Well, Phillip Rivers has what I'm trying to look about 64,000 passing yards. So
and he played. I think Phillip Rivers played 17 years. So Matty Ice is going into year 15.
But if Matt Ryan has a couple of more productive years, he's going to be in that same ballpark. If he's there, like neither would have a Super Bowl. And Matt Ryan would obviously be obviously was right there.
Yeah.
I don't believe Phillip Rivers had an MVP.
Nope.
But do you think how would you kind of compare and contrast Ryan and Rivers? Is it the Super Bowl and the MVP or the difference?
Right. If Ryan don't get in, Phillip Rivers not getting in. I believe Phillip Rivers need Matt Ryan to get in order for him to get in. Because I go back to this. If you break down sports, Freddie Freeman, right? Freddie Freeman gave you an MVP, right, in baseball. With all these players in the national, he gave you an MVP. That's hard to do, Kevin, especially when you're talking about he's one of the best. He's the best first baseman. But now I'm talking about being considered the best player in the National League. When you talk about the quarterback position, right? Tom Brady's never going to stop playing, and he's never going to stop, right? But in Matty Ice's at the height of his career, what was he? He was the MVP. For one season, my talent rose above everybody. Drew Brees never did that. So I got to have the yards in the Super Bowl. Phillip Rivers, who did Phillip Rivers play with? LaDainian and Tomlinson?
Yeah, the MVP is huge. It is.
So because what it does, BJ, people say, oh, Boomer Esiason. Why this dude on when I worked up there in New York, people say, why is dude on TV? Because he was the freaking MVP of the league with Dan Marino. So that's got to mean something because it's an individual thing and what you meant to your team, right? And I think Matty Ice has done both. But this was really going to happen. He go to Indy, he going to light it up because now he got real number one receivers. He got the number one running back in football, at least statistically last year, and he's going to give you 4,000 yards. So Matty Ice start getting to 70. What we going to say then? Well, he just got 70. What? No. It's hard to be consistent, and he's still relevant going to year 15. Where's Cam Newton, who's younger than Matty Ice? Oh, I ain't seen him either. Got a beautiful home in Charlotte. They do not want him, and he is the best player to ever come through the Panthers organization. I'm telling you, BJ, if I'm the number one player for my organization and I'm still being productive, regardless of who you give me, Roddy White. I bet you he loved Matty Ice. When he saw getting them 100 catch seasons back to back to back. And Julio. Who wants Julio right now? I'm telling you, it's hard to be this good this long. Matty Ice Hall of Famer. If he don't get in, it's because these Hall of Fame voters, they don't know what the hell they doing.
That being said, we'll talk to Dave Archer, former Falcons quarterback. I think he might have known what he was doing. We'll talk to him about now with the Falcons Radio Network. What does this departure mean for the Falcons with Matt Ryan going elsewhere, kind of the legacy he leaves behind, and it's Marcus Mariota time for the Atlanta Falcons. What on earth are they going to do offensively? Still needing receivers and a lot of help elsewhere. He'll join us next. Here it's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here on this Tuesday. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, BJ Bennett. Glad you're making us a part of your day streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com, and on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Atlanta Falcons moving on from Matt Ryan as they trade him to Indianapolis. Marcus Mariota signed yesterday to come in and take his place, obviously, in the short term. And joining us here, former Falcons quarterback and color analyst on the Falcons radio network, Dave Archer, joins us here on 3 and Out. Dave, I know yesterday a tough day for Falcons fans. You move on from an icon as somebody that's followed this team for a long time and been a part of this team. How much did yesterday kind of hurt to say goodbye to Matt Ryan?
Yeah, it was some tearjerker moments with it. There's no question about it. I have had the pleasure of getting to know Matt maybe a lot better than most from a media standpoint. Matt and I spoke pre-game, or at least during the week before every one of his games. And then, of course, post-game, he and I had an interview, and then got to know Matt a little bit in the off-season throughout his career here. So calling every one of his games, a lot of memories there, and a lot of really great moments, the highest of highs, some of the lowest of lows. And no matter what the situation was, just the most professional dude I was ever be around, just the nicest guy you'd want to be, really a star in this league, and doesn't carry himself that way, just carries him as a regular guy. And I think that's what endears him to his teammates and always has. But be tough to fill those shoes. I mean, it's a guy that's put up numbers that probably won't be realized by anybody else in this franchise. So big shoes to fill. But from a business standpoint, unfortunately, you can't get sentimental. It's a real business for Arthur and for Terry to try to rebuild this team and put it back in a situation where it has a chance to compete. And some of that meant that they're going to have to clear some of that money off the scale, and some of it had to do with an aging quarterback. And unfortunately, Matt moves on. I'm hoping that things go well for him in Indianapolis, and maybe he can realize some of those highs that he saw back in 2016.
Dave, such incredible and consistent production. Of course, a run to the Super Bowl, an MVP. What makes him such an effective, efficient player?
Well, I think his willingness to not close his mind off to what the game is. I mean, the game's changed since he stepped in 2008. Certainly changed for the Atlanta Falcons. They were a run-oriented team with Michael Turner carrying the rock. And even though Matt threw a touchdown pass on his first throw of his career, which is crazy in itself, I mean, he had to grow into kind of being the guy that he became, that great passer, a guy that had 11 consecutive 4,000-yard passing seasons. You mentioned the MVP and all the things he did, the 370 or whatever it is plus touchdown passes. He had to continue to learn, and I think his willingness to do that. I mean, think about the offensive coordinators the guy had. What do you have, 4 or 5 offensive coordinators when he was here? So changing some of that up, the change of different guys that he had to go to as his go-to receivers throughout his years. But his just willingness to ebb and flow and never to get too high, never get too low. You never sensed that he was distressed about anything, yet there was a seriousness on his face, and he commanded respect from his teammates. And so I think all those things made him great.
I mean, Dave, when you think about the consistency of a guy like Matty Ice and being able to say, like you mentioned, a lot of different guys that he threw the football to, but to know that you had one guy for 14 years, that's 14 drafts, that's 14 years of trying to find his replacement that you couldn't do it, and to elevate the status quo of an Atlanta Falcons franchise that, take away the Super Bowl run, didn't have much of a history. Just talk about how much that was on his shoulders, and he seemed to have carried it well, and obviously you wish him well, but everything that was on his shoulders, he still delivered.
Yeah, no question about it. Well said. You think about where this franchise was when Matt arrived. I mean, you're coming off of the unfortunate situation that happened with Mike Vick, and everybody loved Mike, and he put himself in a bad spot, and things obviously went sideways for him. The franchise was in the hands of Bobby Petrino, who was not the best of people. I can tell you that firsthand. I had a chance to operate and work with him, and that was just a bad situation. And I think Mr. Blank would probably admit a really bad hire. He's only here for about 11 or 12 games and just leaves the franchise. And so we were at the lowest point we could possibly be in 2007. And all of a sudden there in April in the draft, they select this kid out of Boston College that many people thought, okay, should you take him? Should you take the D lineman out of LSU? But Matt Ryan was the guy they decided that had that stuff about him that was going to be able to do all the things you talked about, and his ability to shoulder the franchise, the burden of the franchise, trying to dig themselves out of it. They go to the playoffs the first year he's here, and certainly he had help around him, and he'd be the first guy to tell you any successes he he had guys around him to help make him plays, but I'm not sure as a quarterback that didn't say that once they had an opportunity to have some success in this league. But he just never. He was a champion on the field. He was a champion off the field. I mean, the things that he did from a charity standpoint here, incredible. The numbers and monies that he donated to charities, and he was visible and those type of things, and never had a bad thing to say about anybody. Just was incredible. He's the kind of guy that, frankly, that if you're a parent, there's the guy you want your daughter to marry right there.
Dave Archer joining us here on 3 and Out, and Dave, obviously, what does that signal to you about this Falcons team? I mean, you bring in Marcus Mariota on a 2-year deal. Matt Ryan's gone. I mean, is this full-on rebuild mode at this point?
Yeah, I think that certainly that will be thrown around, and that's certainly probably apropos. I mean, I don't think you can tell Cordero Patterson it's a rebuild. If they do keep Grady Jarrett in the fold, I don't think Grady's thinking about rebuild, or Deion Jones or some of these guys that are going to return from a team that's been to a Super Bowl in their time. So, and that's kind of a nasty word when you start talking about players that are currently under the roster or on the roster. They're not really interested in rebuild. They want to go win. And so I think Terry's done a good job of going to get some guys. Lorenzo Carter's an interesting guy to get from the Giants. I think he could rush the passer. I talked to Dean Pease yesterday. Dean's excited about the potential of what the former Georgia Bulldog can bring to the table. Casey Hayward comes in as a corner. You had a really bad corner on one side of AJ Terrell, and I don't mind telling you that Moreau was a walking penalty. So you had to get something over there. You get Isaiah Oliver back off of injury. You lose Foye Oluokun, so that's really going to be a huge loss in the middle. They got to find somebody to fill that spot to be the signal caller defensively. The offensive line's still what it is, and I think that's what kind of perpetuates maybe the Marcus Mariota's acquisition. Is Mariota knows the system some. He was actually, ironically enough, benched while Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator for Ryan Tannehill, but he still knows the system. And 2 years in Las Vegas, he's gotten healthy. They used him in some of those athletic moments out there. He is more athletic than Matt Ryan is. And when you've got an offensive line that struggled a year ago to protect Matt, really to struggle to protect Matt over the last 3 or 4 seasons, you've got a guy that's much more athletic to be able to extend plays, buy some time, maybe run for first downs, things like that you didn't get from Matt. Now, you're also going to sacrifice the expertise and know-how to get the ball out, like throws he made to Pitts along the sidelines to beat Miami, or the throw he made to Cordero Patterson down the sideline to beat the Saints this last season. You might lose some of that, but you gain that back from an athleticism standpoint. So rebuild's the word. None of the players that are on this roster want to hear about it, though.
So where does this leave Atlanta entering the draft? You have a top 10 pick, of course. Is it best player available? Do they have a couple of guys that maybe they're looking at? Could quarterback be an option? What's the philosophy heading into the draft?
Well, GM Terry Fontenot's been very, very transparent about it. He says best player available. That's why Kyle Pitts came off the board at 4 last year. So we'll have to see what's sitting there at 8. I just don't see where there's a quarterback. If you're going to stick to that mantra that a quarterback comes off the board at 8, I think there's some intriguing guys. Malik Willis is an intriguing guy. I like Desmond Ridder, the veteran quarterback from Cincinnati. I think he brings some interesting things to the table. Obviously, there's conversations about Howell and about Pickett and those guys coming out of the ACC. But I just don't think quarterback's the operative play here. I think you did a good job of going and getting a veteran quarterback that can be that, maybe that placeholder and or play for him. This is only a 28, 29-year-old guy in Mariota. They say he comes in here and blows it up. Let's say he gets it done. That's a guy you might look at extending, and then drafting your quarterback in the next season or two to get a quarterback to come in and a younger guy to learn and kind of train underneath Mariota. But if Mariota lights it up, that's the best of both worlds. He's potential to do that. But the draft has got to be, you've got to be able to attack the passer. And I would think that if one of those pass rushers is sitting there at 8, that's where you go. I would say that, there's probably they're going to try to pay attention to some local flavor. If they can get a couple of those or one of those Georgia Bulldogs off that great defense from a year ago, I don't see that hurt you either. And with the loss of Foye Oluokun, who Dean Pease is just beside himself losing Foye Oluokun, the middle backer who led the league in tackles, don't think that Nakobe Dean is not on the list of players that they may be looking at now out of Georgia. So it brings some different things into focus, but I think you got to be looking at defense and how do I affect the other team's passer.
And David, how much is a guy like a Marcus Mariota, as you mentioned, who understand Arthur Smith, who they got ties, at a previous team, going to help not just help him win games, but kind of help the locker room be won over by him. Because just like I know, you got to win that locker room before you can even start winning games. And year one doesn't really give him what he wants. How much can Marcus Mariota let the rest of the team know? Listen, man, buy into what this guy is selling, and maybe in 2023, when we actually got some money to spend, we can actually go out there and get some quality free agents.
Yeah, I think there's a lot into that. I think there's a lot that Mariota can bring to the table that is away from the game. As far as how hard are you going to practice? How much do you absorb the playbook? How much time do you spend getting yourself ready? How much can he help these younger guys that don't know the system that are coming in? But remember, this system's been in place, so it's not like Mariota's got to teach a bunch of guys new stuff. There'll be a guy here or there that has to learn how the system goes. But certainly from a leadership standpoint, Mariota going to have to step into a very uncomfortable situation. Matt Ryan's been the guy on this team for 14 seasons. And so that's not an easy deal to step into a place where a guy has been an alpha male on this team and try to take hold of that. It'll be very not dicey, but it'll be very delicate how Mariota handles that. Got to be that guy. He has to be that dude, but it'll be interesting to see how he handles that to kind of build himself into that leadership position.
Dave Archer, former Falcons quarterback and member of the Falcons radio network, joining us here. Dave, before we let you go, it is March Madness. Your Iowa State Cyclones, if not for St. Peter's, might be the story of the tourney, right? 2 wins a year ago and in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, both the men's and the ladies. Only 3 teams in the country have 3 teams, both their teams in. Michigan and North Carolina join Iowa State as the only teams that have both their men's and women's teams in the Sweet 16. Excited about that. TJ Otzelberger's done an amazing job with his team. Just 2 wins a year ago, as you mentioned. Didn't win a game in the Big 12 a year ago. And with a bunch of transfer guys, a young freshman point guard who can really get it done, they've found a way to scrap out some wins. Now, they get in slugfests. And so I'm worried about this next game, guys. I won't lie to you. Miami is talented. They're long. They can score. This will be a very tall task for the Cyclones to try to hold this team down. They've held their last 2 opponents to 54 and 49 points. Not sure they're going to be able to do that, this Miami team. So they're going to have to score in this game to advance to the Elite Eight.
And we'll see if those Cyclones move on to the Elite Eight as the 11 seed. Dave, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Always good to be with you guys. Rise up.
Hey, Dave Archer joining us here on 3 and Out Falcons. As we talked about there, moving on from Matt Ryan, who's going to be up in Indianapolis playing for the Colts. We'll come back. Spring practices popping up all over the country, including in Statesboro. Danny Reed, voice of the Georgia Southern Eagles, hops on with us next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, Ben Troop, glad you're making us a part of your day. Spring practice back at it there in Statesboro along the banks of beautiful Eagle Creek. And the voice of the Georgia Southern Eagles, Danny Reed, joins us here on 3 and Out. Danny, welcome. How are you?
What's going on, boys? Good to talk to you guys.
Obviously, we've heard a lot from Clay Helton, and it seemed like he was brought in so early in the process. Like, it's hard to believe this is just now his first time to actually get out on the field with his players, but it is. Here we are at spring practice. What do you think is question number one for you, trying to find out about what exactly this Clay Helton team is going to look like?
Yeah, exactly. It's they got here 4 weeks left in the season still. It was definitely Jared Benko, Dr. Kyle Marrero. They definitely set a trend by doing it this way, but seeing what he had to evaluate, all that was going to be lost, and the fact that offense, defense, and special teams are all going to look different, they're on the field about getting ready to start practice as we speak. And I think that that's the main storyline. It's not so much, who's going to play quarterback. It's how is that offense going to look? What is that defense going to look like with Will Harris serving as a D coordinator for the first time in his career, and then having a true special teams coach? That's not something that Georgia Southern has had, someone specifically dedicated to all special teams. But you bring in Turner West. He has coached at the Citadel. He spent a number of years with the Dallas Cowboys. So having somebody specifically dedicated to that part of the game, and you've got a punter in Anthony Beck who's got a chance to be an All-American this year, two very good kickers in Alex Rayner and Britton Williams. There are questions to be answered, but they're going to use these 15 practices to try to get scheme installed, to get culture installed, and then they'll go forward once fall camp gets here.
Danny, what's the excitement level like? I mean, to Kevin's point, there's been anticipation for quite some time for this spring practice. How much energy is there around campus?
Yeah, there's always a little bit of sizzle down in Statesboro because I've learned in 7 years here there is football season and football off season. There's never really not a time when you're looking at what's going on at the FOC. But in this instance, you've got a full shift for the first time since probably 2016, and you could argue that it's even more than that because the option verbiage is probably taken out of the lexicon. You might see a little bit of it here and there, but it's not going to be the basis of the offensive scheme, which it has been for so long, and it's been so ingrained in this culture. Defensively, is it going to be 3-man? Is it going to be 4-man? Is it going to be both? Is it going to be a hybrid? We don't exactly know yet, and I think you know what you have special teams, but I'm sure that Turner West is going to drop his own little nuances to make that unit stand out even more. But there is a lot of people that want to know what it's going to look like, and when you've got a head coach that's won a Rose Bowl and spent a dozen years out in Los Angeles, you got to imagine that things are going to be done with a certain kind of flair, and I'm personally excited to see it too.
Danny, what type of temperament is a guy like Coach Helton? You talk about winning a Rose Bowl, coming to games, but coming to Georgia Southern. Everybody was thinking, like, where was he going to go? You mentioned Jared Benko being able to get him, but what is his temperament? Because nowadays, is what type of coach? Is he a player's coach? Is he a hard-nosed coach? Is he a disciplinary? From your time, just spending with him, what has been his demeanor to you?
It seems to be a little bit of both. It's somebody that isn't just coached at USC, but it's somebody that's been in coaching for more than a quarter of a century. His dad, Kim Helton, has been a coach at every level. Of course, Tyson Helton, his brother, is the current head coach of Western Kentucky. So not only do they know ball really well. There's not a whole lot that they haven't seen. He seems to be a very genuine person in the limited time I've had a chance to spend with him. We've done a couple of interviews. We've had some sit-downs just getting to know each other. But don't think that a guy like that who has spent some time at the highest level at USC doesn't know how to turn it on to get the most out of his players. So it's that balancing act of he's going to be that player's coach and trying to emphasize that he's there for them and they need to perform a certain way. But if he feels that it's not up to snuff, then that notch is going to get turned up a couple of pegs to make sure that they're getting what they should be out of him coaching them.
Danny, you mentioned it earlier. Obviously, it doesn't matter if you're running the option, not running the option at Georgia Southern, at Appalachian State, at Wake Forest, at Southern Cal, whatever. Everybody wants to know who the quarterback's going to be. Is there quarterback competition, or do you feel pretty solid in saying that Kyle Van Treese is going to get the first crack at this thing?
Well, the coaching answer is that the competition is always open, regardless of if there's a starter, if you play two guys, if you play three, or in the case of Georgia Southern, you saw 5 different guys take snaps last year. 4 different guys started at quarterback, and that's the first time in program history that it's happened. One, you could look at it that you have depth at that position, but 2, you could also see that injuries and other factors were affecting the offense's ability to stay consistent. Part of the reason why the overall record was 3-9. It's tough for me to say who's going to get that first snap, and I think you need to wait until the first scrimmage to see who's going to be in that first group, what those personnel options are going to look like. Van Treese certainly has the pedigree of someone that can do it. He's played for a very tough program at Buffalo, a program that was winning MAC championships not that long ago. He has got the experience. Cam Ransom is somebody that had to step into the starting lineup last year despite getting injured a couple of different times, being a lefty and being as athletic as he is. That provides you a couple of different methods of going. And even if they decide to implement a wildcat, I'm not saying that they have, but if they do, you've got a guy like Caleb Hood, a guy like Sam Kenderson that could go back and take snaps. So there's certainly a number of different guys that you could put into those roles. And they're going to use these next few days and weeks to figure out what works, why it works, and what's going to be best for this team.
I know this question has been asked, hundreds of times already, and, we're just getting to see spring ball here today. But do you have an idea for kind of what a run pass run balance might be from a goal standpoint? I mean, does this team want to be balanced? Do they want to run the football, or do they look at the future and say we want to try to throw the football more than we run it?
Yeah, Coach Helton has said a couple of times he'd like it to be somewhere around the 60% run, 40% pass. And you'd be foolish to not focus on the run with as much talent as in that running back room. Yeah, Logan Wright moves on after last year. J.D. King's coming back from injury. You've got Gerald Green, who's going to be coming back from injury, but somebody that thrived in his action in 2021. Somebody like a Jalen White, who is still waiting to be fully unleashed. He had the great game against Arkansas State and was the reason why Georgia Southern was able to close out Texas State in that victory in San Marcos. And, oh, by the way, you bring in a Terrence Gibbs, who's one of the highest recruits in school history, and an Amari Arnold, who won a state championship at Brooks County this past season. So you got to find a way to get the ball to those guys, but I also think they are developing guys on the outside, and that's what Brian Ellis and Ryan Applin, along with Coach Helton, they're all trying to devise this scheme. Is it going to be like something we've seen before? I mean, college football is becoming a copycat sport, so maybe it's going to look like what you've seen in terms of tempo and yards. Will they pass more? I think it's foolish to say they won't, because of course they're going to, but I also think that with all that running back talent, you got to find a way to run the football somewhere between 35 and 40 times a game, because if you're not, then I think you're wasting your resources.
Danny, you talk about the excitement and going on right now in Statesboro, and rightfully so. But the reality of the situation is you don't get no mulligan years anymore. You're in the Sun Belt. You look at what Louisiana's doing. You look at what Coastal Carolina's doing. You look at the consistency of App. You look at the nice little rivalry you got with that team up there in Atlanta. There's also GSU. Where is Georgia Southern right now? As a team, regardless, before you even get into the spring.
That's one that's tough to answer, because next year, which is this fall, you're adding a Marshall, a Southern Miss, a James Madison, and Old Dominion. 3 of those are in the East Division, which Georgia Southern is going to have to play. And look, the legal things will be worked out between those schools and Conference USA, and I'm confident that those schools will be able to officially join the league, and our schedule won't have to change. The pecking order-wise, Georgia Southern's probably looking up at certain programs, and that's something they're not used to, but you can't deny that App State has been the league's most consistent program over the last 7 years. Coastal Carolina has back-to-back double-digit win seasons. Even somebody like a South Alabama is rapidly improving under Kane Womack. And with the programs that are coming in, Marshall has been more than solid over the last few years. James Madison has been in the FCS semifinals and winning national championships on a regular basis. So not only does the Sun Belt become maybe the top group of 5 league, but the Sun Belt East specifically, I think might be one of the best divisions in all of college football. And I don't know if it's going that outside the box to say that.
Certainly not. Danny Reed, voice of the Georgia Southern Eagles, joining us. We've talked a lot, Danny, about the offensive side of things, and certainly you're going to need to score points. What about the defensive side of the ball? I know when Clay Helton was brought in, it was offense, but where's the attention being spent there on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, the fact that you're getting so many guys back healthy is a main thing. You lost major guys on all 3 levels last year. You were down to your 5 and 6 linebackers at a time. You had 2 true freshmen starting on the inside with Mike Edwards and Eldrick Robinson. Robinson has entered the transfer portal, so it looks like he's going to be continuing his career elsewhere. And then in the secondary, you were down to your number 6 and 7 corners in some instances. So trying to put together a scheme that was going to be successful was almost impossible. Getting healthy guys back like a Derek Canteen, who was a freshman All-American, tied for the national lead in interceptions during the 2020 season. Having him back healthy is going to be a huge boost, and having some depth at linebacker and also up front getting a North Carolina transfer in like Christian Barner to maybe step in for the hole that's left by C.J. Wright. That's going to help firm things up. And not only that, but you've got 12 fifth-year guys that are coming back, and two of those are defensive ends, Dylan Springer and Justin Ellis. So that kind of experience is going to be something that Coach Helton has and will continue to lean on as he continues to learn about this culture and then put his own stamp on it. But listening to the press conference with defensive coordinator Will Harris, he's set an ambitious goal of they want to be a unit that has 30 sacks and forces 30 turnovers. Now, the turnover piece that Eagles have been really good in for the last couple of years, I would say they did take a dip last year in terms of turnover margin. The sack total is one that may take a little bit, but if he could find a way to get the most out of those defensive ends and get that push up front, there's no reason those goals can't be reached.
Danny Reed, voice of the Georgia Southern Eagles. Eagles back at it for spring practice. Danny, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
You got it, guys. Thank you.
And again, we'll keep updating there from beautiful Eagle Creek as everybody excited about the Clay Helton era there in Statesboro. And of course, as he mentioned, that Sunbelt East is no joke. Moving here into 2022. We'll come back with more 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben will take 3 right around the corner. Also, look at the Braves as they are working their way through spring training. Justin Toscano, AJC.com, will join us coming up in the final hour of the program. We'll get the latest there on the Atlanta Braves. Also, Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show next hour. And in the final hour, Chris Gordy's talking SEC football with us from the Locked On SEC podcast. There's a bunch of teams there in the middle of spring ball.
Yeah, spring practice underway everywhere. How are you feeling about the Gators? Billy Napier, spring practice underway.
I mean, obviously I keep up with them. On the Twitter sphere. I mean, they're only going to show the good highlights, a bunch of AR-15 highlights, a bunch of these young running backs. BJ finally get to see what's young man out of Louisiana. You got DeMarcus Bowman and different guys, Lingard and those guys. But listen, whenever you bring in a new coach, new energy, I be trying to keep up with the coaches more than the players. I've never seen as many coaches on one staff, but hey, you could do no wrong in the spring, Kevin and BJ, because there are no games, there are no scores. So now, as long as you come out injury-free, I think that's a good spring.
Yeah, again, a lot of storylines around the SEC. Looking forward to breaking some of those
transfers
down.
All over the place. I mean, it's crazy the roster turnover year to year. I mean, you start to look at depth charts and kind of preseason all conference teams, and you realize guys have moved around. So I think spring ball is a learning process for players, coaches, and fans and media as we kind of adjust to guys in new places.
This time last year, we was talking about Spencer Rattler being a potential Heisman Trophy candidate. Now he's a Gamecock. So you never ever know where some of these players are going to end up. But it's so much. I mean, it's so much about the season. Then it's the off season. Then it's that early signing day, and then who's coming back and who's going to use that year they gave back. But it's spring football. It's now. I remember spring football. No one knew but you and the fans. Now spring football, the games are being moved, so it could be under the lights. It could be on ESPN. Hey, all I know is I just hope my Gators got AR-15 ready to go, and we'll see what happens.
A lot of work to be done there in the spring. We'll hear from Chris Gordy coming up, final hour of the program. We'll take 3 on the flip side. Also look at the Braves there at spring training. Rich Stiles is going to join us in hour number 2 as well. Talk a little golf here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back, hour two. Thanks for being with us here on this Tuesday. We'll look at the Braves. One of the quieter signings just happened for the Braves the other day. We'll break that down. Also, Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, will join us as we're a couple weeks out from the Masters. So looking forward to that. That being said, it's 4 o'clock. Let us take three here on 3 and Out. All right, fellas, take one. Where would be a good fit for Baker Mayfield now with the Deshaun Watson trade having gone through?
A guy that I think is going to have some value when you think about teams that are in need of quarterback help. Teams are always in the market to potentially upgrade at quarterback. Ben, I know you mentioned I don't want to give your answer out, but you mentioned a couple of teams that I think probably have higher expectations than like a Houston, potentially, but maybe Carolina. I know you really like their roster. Potentially, could you go to Carolina and I don't know, be a playoff contender? Maybe. I think potentially you look around. Could you go to the New York Giants? I mean, that's a roster that is young, but I don't know that Daniel Jones has been great, been consistent. I think you would have an upgrade there if you went to New York. I won't say your answer, but I think maybe Carolina, maybe New York with the Giants.
I mean, those are two good landing spots, and both being in the NFC. For me, I think it might be the Seattle Seahawks. I think when you look at how much they're going to miss not having a guy like Russell Wilson, you want to be able to you want to reload. I mean, you don't want to just be trying to go through the rebuild, because the thing about rebuilding a guy like Pete Carroll is it's not like he's the guy that wants to start from scratch with a brand new. And I don't think they're really too high on Drew Lock. You get a guy like Baker Mayfield going from the AFC to the NFC. Potentially going from Cleveland, to Seattle. He gets guys like DK Metcalf. He get no Bobby Wagner, but still a really good defense. Now that division is not going to be easy to go through when you look at defending Super Bowl champs and the Rams. But I think the guy like Baker Mayfield still brings quality to the quarterback position. Wasn't the guy that people thought he was going to be being the number one overall pick to go into his fourth year, but still can push the ball down the field. You're going to have a quality running game. You're going to have a quality defense around him. You're going to have a head coach that has stability. Pete Carroll, Super Bowl winner, went to 2 Super Bowls. He's definitely going to be able to have that credibility. So for me, while I like Carolina, while I like New York, I think Seattle might be the best landing spot.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot of interesting spots where Baker Mayfield could wind up. I think the question is, with all the weapons he had in Cleveland, is he going to land anywhere else that has anywhere close to that? I mean, he
had two of everything.
And again, I think that's where you're at. If you're Baker Mayfield, it's like you probably had it pretty good on offense in Cleveland. I know it is Cleveland, but where are you going to go where you're going to have better weapons, chance to succeed? I guess maybe going to Seattle would be the best, because you get a guy, Pete Carroll, that kind of has that repertoire of being a pro's pro. And I guess I just don't know if Baker Mayfield, for me, is going to work out long term.
Let me ask you this, just because it's your team. I know the Titans have had some success with Ryan Tannehill. Do you think they would be in the market, or is Tannehill a better option than Mayfield at this point?
I do. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is a better option than Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield got to understand that he's not going to be the focal point if he comes to Tennessee. It's all about running the football, but you get guys like A.J. Brown, obviously Julio Jones has moved on from him. But the thing about Mike Vrabel, they want to play a certain style of football in Tennessee. They want to play the ground and pound. They want to do play action, go over the top when they have to. But the thing about Baker Mayfield, Kevin, and BJ is this: the guy can play the game, right? But Kevin, you make up a good point. They gave you Odell, right? They gave you Jarvis Landry. They gave you Peoples-Jones. They gave you David Njoku. They gave you Austin Hooper. They gave you Akeem Hunt. I mean, they also gave you Nick Chubb. You had Myles Garrett on the other side. You had a solid defense. You had a solid team. But I think Baker Mayfield wants to be the reason that they win, not that they win. Who does that sound like? Kind of sounds like Aaron Rodgers. Certain guys want to be the reason why you're winning, not that you're winning. And I don't know if he goes to a place like Tennessee, BJ, where they play a certain style of football, and Mike Vrabel going to say, dude, I'm not impressed by you. I come from the Bill Belichick coaching tree. I've been successful as a player. I got coach of the year last year. I think he would be. Listen, I love Ryan Tannehill, not
I
because
say
I want
you're
to.
winning with a less talented quarterback.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I
than
love
Baker
Ryan.
Mayfield.
Listen, Ryan Tannehill is Ryan Tannehill getting invited to the family barbecue because we family members right now because he played for the Titans. I ain't invite him. He just knew what to be. At the end of the day, if Baker Mayfield isn't a step up for Ryan Tannehill, because Ryan Tannehill's good, but did anybody ever say Ryan Tannehill's that dude? He gonna take. No, so if you can get Baker Mayfield, I think you go out there and get him. But what scares people is this is the final year of his contract. They don't want to have to give him them potential Deshaun Watson type numbers when it's time to ring him up.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens here. Let's move along. Take two. What would be your most compelling Final Four? Would you like to see a Duke UNC Final Four matchup, which could happen, or would you like to see a St. Peter's make a run? It'd be a 15 seed. I don't think that's ever happened. Has it a 15 seed in the Final Four?
That's St. Peter's in the Final Four would be amazing, and that win over Kentucky, and then to follow it up and beat Murray State, who again I mentioned, I think they had 2 losses entering that game. I mean, St. Peter's has been incredible, but I do think for as much as that Cinderella story is amazing, I think the Duke North Carolina, with it being Coach K's final year, I mean, what a story. That's a movie script, right? When you think about Duke Carolina, the college basketball rivalry that it is, and then you have Coach K, who lost at home to North Carolina in his final game in Cameron Indoor. I think Duke Carolina, the rivalry it is, to have that in the Final Four, and then to have that potentially either be a springboard to a championship game for Coach K, or North Carolina shuts it down again. That would just be wow, that would be incredible. But St. Peter's as well.
St. Peter's to me would be the most intriguing because, I mean, let's face it, the Peacocks, I mean, this Cinderella run has been incredible, and you're going to get one every year. I don't think you've ever seen anything like, St. Peter's Peacock, Jersey City, New Jersey, stand up. I live real close to Jersey City when I was in New Jersey. Knew nothing about no Peacocks or no St. Peter's. But because this is about taking down the evil empire known as Duke, I would love for North Carolina to just tell Duke, look, we don't like y'all. We're not fans of Coach K. We don't care about his legacy. Nothing more to not only, like you said, BJ, beat you the last game of the regular season at home. If UNC, Coach Hubert, look at Coach K and go, listen, man, we run Tobacco Road. We don't like y'all. We don't like y'all. Like, because that's what it's going to be, right? It's going to be star-studded. Everybody's going to be, hey, man, let's get it to Coach K. What's out of Coach K? Now, Georgia fans aren't. They don't want him to ever leave because they want to have something to root for in basketball season. I get that part.
And there it is.
No. Let's call it what it is. Like, look, we got to make a declaration right now. Whatever school you went to, that's who you root for.
No, I will say on some of the social medias, I have seen a lot of Coach K tribute video love from people with Georgia national championship.
That's some old.
That's
ridiculous.
I'm just saying. People say, "Why do you think?" Because there's truth in it.
That is the truth. No. I'm listen. I'm not gonna.
A lot of Coach K fans.
I'm not gonna call. There's a very, very highly distinguished gentleman that we know does great things for this radio network. We appreciate him, but he roots for a different team during college football season, a different team during college basketball season, and doesn't even root for the home state team during baseball season. So all I'm saying is, if somebody say who you root for in college football, root for them dogs. I said, so who you root for in basketball season? Duke. Well, who do you root for in baseball? The Yankees. You know what? Just go ahead. But we need Coach K to be done. Tired of dealing with him.
Yeah, I think it would be poetic to have North Carolina in the Coach K career. Because, again, if I heard it once, I heard it 10,000 times over the weekend. This could be Mike Krzyzewski's last game. Like, people want so bad for him to go out with a championship. It's ridiculous. And it's like, I get we always want that Hollywood ending. That's why people got behind Stetson Bennett. Oh, it's a great movie. He's going to make the script. And so I get it. I don't need Coach K to win another championship.
Nope.
I'm fine. Look, as somebody
He's got what, 5?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of Coach K. We've seen a lot of great teams. We know all the guys that are on TV, guys who won national championships, been in the NBA, analysts on ESPN talking about we're going to break down Coach K's game. Oh, okay.
Yeah. What makes him a great guy? Is he a great guy? He's a great coach.
I don't know, but anyway, I don't care. I personally would rather. I would rather do to Gonzaga. One, because it helps my bracket. But yeah, I don't think St. Peter's going to make the Final Four. Again, I think they're going to have trouble with Purdue. Purdue's got some size. St. Peter's does not. And I think this is where the Cinderella season ends. And Coach Holloway, if he wants to, going to have an opportunity to go get paid somewhere, not named St. Peter's, to coach basketball more than likely. Moving along, take 3. Who should people be watching out for at Braves spring training? And we'll talk to Justin Toscano, AJC.com, new Braves beat writer. He's had an eventful first month and a half on the job, stepped into the gig in the middle of a work stoppage, comes out of the work stoppage, the franchise face doesn't get re-signed, and coming off a World Series. Welcome to the gig. But who should you be watching out for there at spring training?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a ton of uncertainty, right? Like, I mean, you look at the lineup, and I think you pretty much have a good sense for who's going to be where. You look at the bullpen. I will get to this momentarily, but the bullpen is the best in baseball. I mean, what a just stacked bullpen. And then I think you look at the front end of the rotation, and we're all going to have to wait and see with Mike Soroka to see where he is in his recovery process. But I think you look at the starting 3, the big 3, so to speak, and it's of course Max Fried, Charlie Morton, and Ian Anderson. Huascar Ynoa probably right there as well. I think he pitched today in the spring training game. I think you're looking at Kyle Wright. Kyle Wright has had some great moments for the Braves. He's also had a couple of moments where it's gotten away from him a little bit. Has struggled with some of the control. He's had that volatility you expect from a young pitcher, but I don't know that he's that young anymore. I mean, now he's had some experience. He's had a couple of years at the major league level, and the Braves need him to be that 5th starter to stabilize the back end of the rotation. So for some guys, spring training stuff doesn't really matter. I mean, look, if Ozzie Albies hits 400 or 200, you know what kind of player he's going to be. I think for Kyle Wright, the confidence needs to be there. I think if he has a good spring, he solidifies himself as the 5th starter. Maybe Kyle Muller, Colin McHugh. There are other guys that are potential options, but I think Kyle Wright needs to have a big spring.
For me, BJ, I think it is somebody that's not on the field, Kevin, as well. I mean, I think you are looking at the health of Mike Soroka. This time last year, they were saying the same thing. He's on schedule. I think he's going to be able to play. And the season came, I'm just checking to make sure he's staying on schedule. Because, BJ, you talk about Kyle Wright, you talk about Max Fried, you talk about Ian Anderson, those guys, Charlie Morton. You get to add a Mike Soroka to that. That makes you even more dangerous. Because the thing about this team is, yes, out of the big 3, Kevin, we will say, is it going to be Peterson? Is it going to be Soler? Is it going to be Rosario? They got Rosario. Boom. That's how you got out of the big 3 that you got at the trade deadline. Obviously, there's a guy by the name of Ronald Acuna Jr. Take your time, young man. There will be no rushing you back at all. I don't care. Snit, you can handle the sit your behind down. Congratulations. He's a dad now. I see him in there, coming there with a little Ronald Acuna Jr. I hope to God that young man does not play baseball, because you don't want to live up to the big shoes of his daddy. But I think it is the health of Mike Soroka, because the fact of the matter is that's gonna be on weigh heavily on this team, because they're gonna be wondering, when does he come back? Because this Braves team is loaded. I am not saying they are not loaded. I am not saying that. But Kevin, you the one I go to for my baseball knowledge. With a healthy Mike Soroka added to this lineup, how much? And that's assuming that he's the Mike Soroka that left. Yep. We get that part. If he's halfway to what he was, how much more dangerous does he make this lineup?
Very much. I mean, because now you look at everybody that's at the top of that rotation, not only has multiple years of NLCS experience, they all now have World Series experience and know what that means. So I think huge. To me, I look at spring training, not so much for the guys that I'm going to see during the regular season, but the guys that I could see in the regular season. So that's why when you see a guy like Michael Harris, the second, I'm looking at that guy. Why? Because he's going to be one of those guys. If the Braves go down an outfielder, it's going to be him. It's going to be Waters. It's going to be Drew. It's going to be one of those 2 guys. You watch those guys. A guy that pitched today, Spencer Strider, apparently pitched really, really well. A lot of people think, could he have an outside chance at the 5th spot? Who knows? But you watch those guys on the back end that you may not see in April, you may not see in May, but you could see it in June, July, August. If the Braves get in a pinch, you say, who's the next guy coming up? Watch him now, because I think this Braves team is one that, BJ, you bring up a point. When you're coming off a World Series and your front office goes out and spins and your roster is not appreciably worse, I'm sorry, there's a lot of spots for people to just show up and splash on the scene, right? It's pretty well set. We know what we got. So I think you start looking at who's going to be the next guy if we get in trouble. If somebody gets hurt, who's going to be that guy that comes in and fills in the gap? That's the guys I'm watching there at spring training. That's take 3. We do it every day at this time. We'll come back. We'll look at this Braves team. Might they have one of the best position groups in Major League Baseball with one of the more kind of quieter signings, really, in the last couple of days. We'll come back. It's 3 and Out, Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, Ben Troop, glad you're making us a part of your day. And quietly, BJ and Ben, the Braves have put together, they had one of the best last season, but I think with the addition of Kenley Jansen, have locked it up. They got the best bullpen in Major League Baseball. And I think you look at what the Braves are looking at coming into 2022. If Max Fried gives you 6 and he leaves with a lead, if Ian Anderson gives you 6, I know you like them to go deeper, but gives you 6 with a lead. You got the night shift coming back, which is Luke Jackson, Minter, Matzik, and Will Smith. And then you add a guy like Kenley Jansen, who is a all-star, 3-time all-star, won the 2020 World Series, 38 saves last year. This could be lights out time for the Atlanta Braves. And I thought, one, because it kind of got finished around midnight Eastern time, it seems like not a lot of folks have sunk in what that signing meant. And then you ask Will Smith, hey, you cool with this? He's like, yeah, I don't care if I pitch the 9th. I want to win. I want to win another World Series. So you get that. And then Kenley Jansen, this could be the best bullpen in all of baseball.
Great addition. Kenley Jansen, a 3-time All-Star, World Series champion last season with L.A., an ERA near 2, 38 saves, as you talked about. And I think he is a slam-the-door, top end closer that has done it. Obviously, pressure moments, the big stage, the postseason, division races. So I love that addition. And you're talking about a bullpen that on paper is the best in baseball. It is. And I'm really not sure it's close. And when you think about not only the number of guys, but the versatility. I mean, Tyler Matzik, as he showed in the postseason, you can close a game with him. He can set up. He can be the high leverage guy, Kevin, where you have a couple of runners on and you have to get a double play or get a key out. AJ Minter can close. He can be an 8th inning guy. Colin McHugh has pitched in the postseason. He's potentially a long relief guy where if you need someone to go, 3 innings, 4 innings, I think he can do that. Luke Jackson was fantastic for much of last year. That slider is impossible to hit. And I think when we evaluate baseball teams, you kind of naturally go towards, oh man, the big starting pitchers or who are the big bats in the lineup. You win games with the bullpen. Braves fans know that. You lose games with the bullpen. Braves fans know that when you look back over, last couple of years with this organization. So this is a great addition. And Kevin, you're right. I guess because it sort of broke late at night, you didn't have the huge fanfare, the national media response. I think this is one of the best signings we've seen. Great job by Alex Anthopoulos. And if the Braves have a lead in the 9th inning, game's over.
I mean, I do agree. When it came through, I said Kenley Jansen. I said, it seemed like every time I watched the Dodgers in the postseason, this guy was being called up to close games. But Kevin, you mentioned the night shift. We mentioned the World Series. This is the same bullpen that used to be the Achilles heel for this Braves team. Now they are one of the strengths, if not the strength, of this Braves team. And you talk about confidence that was built in the World Series. I mean, you add a guy like Kenley Jansen, that's only going to add to the confidence. And Kevin, something you said, Will Smith says, Alex Anthopoulos calls him out of respect. Hey, Will, we're going to get Kenley Jansen. Hey, I want to get another ring. Like,
I think that's going to go unnoticed because he could have said, no, I'm the guy. Because there's kind of the ego trip that goes with that. Yeah.
But I think, too, one thing about it is Will Smith shows you, when Will Smith says, I'm good with it, that means he's bought into the culture of the Braves, not just the team of the Braves. Because the one thing about Alex Anthopoulos is this. He doesn't move like every other GM moves, but he makes quality moves. Like we kept saying, which one of the big 3 at the trade deadline do you get? You got to get one. He got Rosario. You can live with it because you know what Soler did. I mean, somebody's going to snatch him up. He goes to the Marlins, and obviously couldn't get Jock Peterson, but you add a guy, like Jansen. I think BJ and Kevin, I think sometimes confidence is that great elixir when you talk about sports. If I'm adding a guy to this bullpen or whatever that's as good as Jansen, is only going to help. Plus, once again, the most exciting team after the 6th inning used to be the Braves because they got to go to the bullpen. You'd be like, ooh, it used to get ugly. Now, hey man, Braves can. I mean, look, we ain't talking about the Glavine and Smoltz days, but they can win 2-0. They can win 3-0. And you don't want to have to sweat it out. But Kevin said if the starter can give us 6 innings, where do that at?
That's what I wanted to ask because I know in the past you haven't necessarily, and few people been a big fan of just give me 5. But with the way the bullpen is constructed with the depth and the versatility, I mean, is that actually a goal that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Brian Snitker, I'm talking to guys in spring training and say, Max, go out on the mound with confidence that if you give me 5 or 6 really good innings, we're going to win. If you give me 7 good innings, we're really going to win. I would say the same for Ian Anderson. I mean, look, BJ, you are so deep, and with the 3 batter rule in Major League Baseball, you could potentially run out, if your starter gives you 7, a couple of sets of closers. You could come out with Matzik,
real quick.
You could come out with Matzik and Kenley Jansen, and if you're like, they're kind of tired, the next night come back with Minter and Smith.
Yeah, are there fixed roles in your mind? I mean, is there a 7th inning and 8th inning? And
I think you're going to have some of that, but I think when Kenley Jansen gets overused, Will Smith will be able to close. So I think that's the plan going forward. But look, if I'm Brian Snitker, I have option, and I told you before the show, I said if there's one thing I would worry about, it would be bullpen overuse. Why? Because I think, Brian Snitker loves to use the bullpen. It's just the specialization of baseball. People like to go to the bullpen and fit those defined roles. But I think if you can avoid some of that and get just one extra inning out of your starter and have a group of 5 guys like Jackson, Minter, Matzik, Smith, and Jansen stay fresh, oh my goodness, what a difference that would be. And you could have, again, if Jansen's getting overused, you have another guy who could close. You have 3 or 4 guys in that night shift crew that have gotten saves.
I mean, technically, when you think about Jansen, obviously, Smith, obviously, Matzik, Jackson, and Minter,
they've all at various times had to close.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have a big time experience there. Now, have they all had to do it in the World Series? No, but I mean, Tyler Matzik pitched maybe some of the toughest innings the Braves had all year in the postseason. So, experienced, talented. I mean, it's everything you want. And again, when you're able to take a baseball game and basically say, if we get to the 6th inning and we need 9 outs, you're not going to beat us. That is a confidence play, not only for the manager, not only for the bullpen, for the guys that start the game. And again, I don't want to give Max Fried and Charlie Morton the mindset of, hey, I just need to go 5 innings. But I think if I tell Max Fried and Charlie Morton and Ian Anderson, you go 5, we're in good shape. If you go 6 and we have a lead, we feel real good. If you can give us 7 on a great pitching performance, there is not a chance we're going to lose that ball game. I feel like that's the mindset you should have if you're up there. I mean, it's going to happen. It's baseball, but more often than not, if you have a lead in the 7th inning with this crew, you're going to win.
And I know we're looking
a lot of games.
Way ahead. Look, we're looking way ahead. But to me, as we saw last year, this is the kind of bullpen you win a World Series with. This is a bullpen built for the postseason, because for as important as a bullpen is over the duration of 162, your bullpens might be the most important aspect of your team in the postseason. Get used in
the postseason. Yeah. Starters go like 3, maybe 4 innings at the most.
In the postseason, your bullpen is essentially collectively a starting pitcher every night with the innings they eat up. So I just think brilliant what they've done with the bullpen.
Alex Anthopoulos always making moves. Listen, he's playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. He's been doing it. He's been doing it the Braves way. He couldn't worry himself about what's going on around, in the rest of his division. But look, when you bring on a guy like Jansen, I mean, you understand what you're doing to that bullpen. And like you say, Kevin, I mean, it's a confidence builder because it makes everybody else say, look, man, you still got to deal with these bats. You still got to deal with this Braves offense, whoever the opposing. But now if the Braves get up 3-4 runs, they got a chance to win a lot of games. Well, great.
And something I think is also very interesting to point out is that Ben said, hey, this is a team that could win 2-0. Yeah, some nights if your offense isn't working, you could still lock it down and win a 1-0 ball game too. I just think, as I look at this lineup, you're not going to play a lot of 2-run ball games. You're going to have a lot of 4, 5, 6-run nights, maybe even more, with the way this lineup can hit the baseball.
Yeah, and it's interesting to look at some of the
and with
preseason.
The DH, you would expect that to go up. Sure. Sorry,
no. Power rankings, right? And there's a lot of high expectations, obviously, for some of the starting pitchers in the division, the big names. You think about Max Scherzer. Well, the thing about Max Scherzer, when you compare that addition to a Kenley Jansen, and I love starting pitchers, but Max Scherzer plays 1 time a week. He plays 1 time a week. Kenley Jansen, theoretically, and Kevin, like you said, you don't want to overuse him, but this is a guy that could 3-4 times a week and in high leverage situations. So I know sometimes the starting pitching contracts and free agent signings get all the attention and hype. Boy, if you have a bullpen that can shut it down, if you have a bullpen with depth, if you have a bullpen, and I don't know, Kevin, maybe off the top of your head kind of the righty-lefty situation. I I'm sure you have options there. Colin McHugh can do a number of different things. I mean, options. Brian Snitker's going to have options every single night.
And again, whoever he brings out there is going to be nasty. So, I mean, I think that is, the end of the day, a lot of stuff to be excited about. We got more to come here at 3 and Out. We're a couple of weeks away from the Masters. Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, will join us when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, BJ Bennett. Thanks for making us a part of your day. Justin Toscano, AJC.com, covers the Atlanta Braves. He will join us coming up in the final hour of the program. Also, Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast, will join us as spring practices all over the Southeastern Conference, and we'll hear from him coming up in the final hour of the program. Got a little Hawks and Knicks tonight. Hawks with a little bit of the Atlanta Braves disease from a season ago. Can't get above 500 no matter what they try, and they'll try to do it against the Knicks tonight. If they win, they'll be 36-36. I think trying to get out of the bottom two in the play-in situation.
Yeah, it's interesting because you don't want to play the Nets, and I know you can't kind of do it that way. You want to win. They're in the 10 spot now. I think it would take a just unprecedented fall and then change at the bottom of the standings for the Hawks to not be in. I think they're in really good shape to get into the play-in tournament. You probably don't want to play the Nets, but you're right. They have not been able to get over 500. They've been 1 or 2 games below. They've gotten to 500, and then for whatever reason, just can't get that winning record. I think you can win in New York tonight. You have more to play for. You're going to be a postseason team. You're again trying to get to 500, but just another remarkable season from Trae Young. Just to be able to watch him every night. It's 30-10. It's what do you have last week? 45-15. So he is just so electric, so dynamic. When he is in rhythm, scores at a rate and an efficiency level that few players in the league can. I think sometimes kind of what the Hawks do depends on the production of Bogdanovich, Gallinari, Hunter, some of the secondary scoring options. Clint Capella's been rebounding. I know you've dealt with some injuries, but I think a chance to win tonight, get to 500. You're going to be in the playoffs, and you just hope you don't play Brooklyn in the play-in, I guess, tournament first round.
This is what we talked about last year, though, Kevin. Around when it comes to these young Hawks, how do they handle success coming off Eastern Conference Finals? Meeting the Giannis and those guys. But hey, what a difference a year makes. I mean, you're still dealing with a young crop of players. BJ that's still trying to figure out how to win. Nate McMillan. I mean, get that interim tag off, and now, being the head coach. I'm going to say the same thing about the Hawks I always say. Can they be active on the defensive end? You don't got to be shut down. Can they be active? They can go out there and run with the best of them. Every time they play Milwaukee, it's a dogfight. And
they do seem to play better against the better team, which is kind of weird.
I think what happens is, though, sometimes, you play down the lesser competition, you play up the better competition. But the thing about this Hawks team, they still Trigger Trae is. It's all going to go off him. He's going to give you quality minutes, quality buckets. But decision making down the stretch, can we do what hasn't been done in basketball in the last 10 years? Can you box out? Can you rebound? Can you make a stop? And by all means, can you hit a free throw? If those things happen for these Hawks team, they're going to be they seem to play really, really good once they get in the playoffs, but they want to get away from that 10 spot. I don't like wavering. Be right at give me 6, 7, not 8, 9 to 10.
I think 6, 7 would be tough at this point.
Yeah,
obviously,
got a little work to do.
Obviously no John Collins, but Trae Young has just been extraordinary. And I think is he where would y'all rank him right now? I mean, top what?
Top 20?
I was going to say top 15.
I mean, yeah, I would say this. If I'm in the top 10 or top 15, top 20 in the league, when, let's face it, we've got the rate. No one compares him to Luka anymore. Like, that's how because at first, don't do it. I think right now, Trae has had a better career thus far than Luka, even though Luka has zero help.
Well, has the postseason success.
Yeah, postseason. But like I said, it's what you have to. What have you done for me lately? Like the shoes, like the contract extension. We got to get back in the playoffs. Got to make some noise because if they do indeed, they're not gonna beat Milwaukee. They're not gonna beat the Heat. I get it.
I'm just saying the Braves got to 500, got the winning record, and then
right.
and then won the World Series. I'm just saying.
Oh, are you trying to say Trae said the notion that I want to bring a championship here? We know Trae.
Well, I think what he's saying is the Hawks need to trade for Jorge Soler,
or Jock Peterson, or Rosario.
Just get one of those guys. That's fine.
Go get one of Giannis's brothers. You can't get Giannis.
Have one of the Hawks start wearing pearls out there playing the basketball game and turn the whole thing around. No,
we got the remedy.
Trade Matt Ryan.
Just get to 500. Just get to 500. Then you move on to the winning record. Then you win in the playoffs.
That's how it's supposed to go.
Just get in the playoffs. We won't care what that. Who's sticking 500? Get the playoffs.
We'll call that a dub if they get there at the end of the day. We got a busy final hour coming up. Justin Toscano, AJC.com, covers the Atlanta Braves. He's had quite an interesting first month or so. He just started on the gig there in February and came in at a work stoppage. The face of the franchise, not re-signed. And still one of the better teams in Major League Baseball, if not one of the best contenders for the World Series here in 2022. We'll get his thoughts when we come back. Also, Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast, will join us, and we'll hear from Dave Archer, former Falcons quarterback, on the departure of one Matt Ryan, who was wearing the Indy blue and white today. Saw a picture of him holding up the jersey and looks odd. Not gonna lie. We'll come back. And Justin Toscano joins us. We're talking Braves baseball next here on 3 and Out. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, Ben Troop. Glad you're making us a part of your day. Braves at spring training. And again, working their way up towards that April 7th opening day. Joining us here, he covers the Atlanta Braves beat for the AJC.com. Justin Toscano joins us here on 3 and Out. Justin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
And hey, we appreciate you coming on, and welcome to the Braves beat. I know it's been an interesting ride since you started, right? Work stoppage, the face of the franchise not re-signed, a lot of guys being brought in, and still World Series contenders through it all. How would you rate this Braves offseason to this point?
Yeah, it's been pretty hectic. I came over from the Mets beat, and everybody said this would be a little more subdued, and so far I haven't seen that. But no, I think the Braves are in a good spot. Obviously, a lot of people were pretty upset over Freddie Freeman leaving. That's going to be a hole you can't replace, but they've done pretty well to fill it with a guy you couldn't have handpicked better, and then rounding out the roster otherwise. So it looks like things are kind of full steam ahead.
Justin, what are your thoughts on how the Freddie Freeman situation sort of played out from a contractual standpoint? What was offered, what wasn't, the timing, obviously the trade for Matt Olson. How do you kind of process how all of that played out?
Yeah, so from a bigger picture, the weirdest part of this entire situation is you have two sides, Freddie Freeman's side and the Braves. Both sides wanted a reunion, and yet we're still not able to make it happen. And I think that's the weirdest part. And I think when you start parsing this thing with what had come out, I know Buster only had a piece last week and had gotten some kind of things on background about a deadline that Excel Sports Management, Freddie Freeman's camp, had given the Braves a 1 hour deadline for two separate deals or whatnot that they had, thought that the Braves would accept. The Braves didn't. The Braves had to pivot. And so I think in this case, you kind of saw a little bit of Freddie Freeman's camp playing a little bit of hardball with Alex Anthopoulos, and Alex didn't budge. And, credit to him. He got a guy who was about 5 years younger, can produce at a similar rate for longer and cheaper. And then, rounded out the roster otherwise after that. So I think when you kind of look back at this, the strange part for me is that I know Freddie Freeman's value had gone way up just by virtue of having let him get to free agency after two productive years, including, an MVP season. But, and then all the years before that on his contract. But I had heard that the Braves offered 5 years and $140 million with a little flexibility to perhaps go up on that. I'm not sure how much they would have went up, but to me that seems like a good amount of money for a first baseman who at the end of the deal would have been about 37 years old. And I know the reports, for a while have had Freddie wanted that sixth year. And you could argue the Braves, one, should have never let it get to that point. Two, should have just paid the franchise icon more. But on the other hand, you look at what it did to Freddie's market when the Braves pulled out of that and pivoted. He got a lower AAV or, just about the same AAV with the Dodgers. And then you have higher taxes in California. So, and then a lot of deferred money, which brought the value of the deal down. So a really strange situation. But I think my final takeaway is just I think the Braves are in a better spot for their future. But I do understand that for some people, that's not going to lessen the blow of losing an icon.
But Justin, a guy like Alex Anthopoulos, you talk about the iconic figure that is Freddie Freeman, but you get Matt Olson, and you talk about a guy who's younger. Nobody's better at the first base position than Freddie Freeman. But Matt Olson was highly sought after as well. There was a lot of teams trying to get his services as well. You re-sign Rosario. You bring in a guy like Kenley Jansen. Lo and behold, you did a really, really good job. But obviously, when you wasn't able to sign an iconic figure like Freddie Freeman, people are going to hang it over his head. But I think Alex Anthopoulos don't get enough credit for the culture he's built in Atlanta, not just building around one player.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you don't come into a place, win the NL East, specifically that division with the tough teams it's had over the years. You don't win that division 4 straight years, go to the league championship series, and then the next year win the World Series if you're not building something sustainable, if you don't have a great culture. And I think culture is always tough to quantify, but when you lose Ronald Acuna Jr. last year, and you make a flurry of moves at the deadline to keep yourselves in it, and then you make moves like, signing Charlie Morton, and then letting people know that the team know that he and others are going to be part of kind of the future here a little bit. All of that's done to kind of keep together the clubhouse and to sustain a culture. And the Braves do extensive work before signing guys, before trading for guys on guys' makeup and character, because they want to continue that. And they don't want any toxic characters in the clubhouse. And I do think, I think he deserves a massive amount of credit, because look, I think when you lose a guy like Freddie Freeman, you simply not only lose him, but you move on from him before he even signs somewhere else. That is a move that has the potential to completely dismantle a clubhouse emotionally, and yet they didn't do that. And I think that goes to show the trust the players have in Alex. And then look, signing him Olsen to a long-term extension, telling players basically that he was going to be part of the future there. They've done a really good job with that, and he's done a really good job within his budget constraints. And trying to build the best team possible. I think there are a lot of GMs who would have given up last summer when the team was under 500. And look, he really didn't. He kind of, smelled opportunity for them to contend and pounced on it. And I do think he deserves a lot of credit, because when you look at the Braves aren't a small market team, but they're not Los Angeles, and they're not New York. And when you look at what Alex has done to build a sustainable winner, I think it's very impressive.
Justin, you mentioned the signings that Alex has been able to pull off. Kenley Jansen, that was one that literally kind of popped up in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, the Braves are in on Kenley Jansen. One, how surprised were you that move happened? And two, are the Braves playing 6-inning baseball here in 2022?
Yeah, seriously. No, that one was, they weren't even in on Kenley. That came out of nowhere, I think, for everybody around the game. But it's funny because the Freddie Freeman situation and his timing not working with the Braves is kind of what happened with Kenley Jansen. The Dodgers and the Braves made good on that. But yeah, you mentioned them kind of shortening the game a little bit, giving a reliever $16 million, a new closer. I think they've built a deep bullpen, and Alex has said, if you need that throughout the season, because you don't have the off days like you do in the postseason. And the off days help the Braves cover themselves a lot last postseason. But yeah, now you're looking at, you've got 3 rotation locks in Max Fried, Charlie Morton, and Ian Anderson, but there's some question marks in the back end of that rotation, especially because they might need to use a 6-man rotation at the beginning of the year with 14 straight, games in 14 days. So to have a deep bullpen where you're not making guys go 7 or 8 innings is huge. Not only Kenley Jansen, but Colin McHugh, and then you add that to the stable of guys they had who really showed their value last season. This is a really deep bullpen. I think Alex said it best. If you're a team that plans on contending, if you plan on winning a lot of games, you're going to be in a lot of close games. And I think this is going to really help them out, not only from that standpoint, but to make them more multiple, to make them able to hold, games if they're down a run or two, to be able to deploy an opener here or there and have multiple options to do that, along that. I think, it's going to make them really adjustable in the back end and going to give Brian Snitker really a wealth of options.
Justin, where are the Braves with Ronald Acuna? Where is he in his rehabilitation? Is there a chance early in the season maybe he plays the DH? When will we see him in the outfield? Do we know any of that yet?
Yeah, so Alex said on the radio, I think it was last week on some radio station, that he believes Ronald Acuna Jr. can play DH sort of late April, but late May seems to be kind of the timeline for when he can play the field, and that's what I had heard. Late May return before the lockout, even as the lockout ended. So yeah, it really seems like he might be able to play some DH, but we'll have to see how they balance that as it comes, because you don't know, if he's not going to be playing in the field, do you really want him risking the knee, running the bases, swinging, rotating, things like that. And that's really a decision, they're going to have to make. They've got doctors who are a lot smarter than me and you guys. But I think it could be plausible, especially if Alex did mention that publicly. I think that is always something that I've had in the back of my head that, you would think would be plausible, could be expected. Now we'll see if they execute it. But I think it's something that, that could be done, especially because the DH gives them a lot of opportunity to keep him off his legs, especially if they, have other restrictions and ask him not to be as aggressive. Now, I don't know how that's going to work. Asking somebody like Ronald Acuna Jr. not to be as aggressive on the bases, he certainly plays, 110%. But I think that's a possibility to get him some at bats and kind of put some extra firepower in the lineup for sure before he's able to play, the field full time.
Well, 2021 was definitely a setback year for Mike Soroka. What is the timeline for him in 2022?
Yeah, well, he didn't. I spoke to him last week, and he didn't offer me a specific timeline. But I've heard the timeline for him is post All-Star break. Now, that gets muddled with. I know that's not super specific, but we'll have to get closer and see, how long he spends with the affiliates and how long he spends rehabbing, when he can actually, get off a mound. I know he's been throwing and straight line running, but he hasn't been doing baseball specific activities yet. And so it should be another month or two before he does that, based on my conversation with him. And so we'll kind of see then, but I know the Braves, even like as they entered camp, I know they were kind of targeting, I'd heard they were kind of targeting post All-Star break for guys like him and Kirby Yates.
Justin Toscano, AJC.com, covers the Atlanta Braves. Justin, obviously, nobody's going to everybody loves to overreact, I should say, on social media. But I guess tell folks listening about Braves didn't reach an arbitration deal with Riley, Swanson, Max Fried, and pretty much everybody that was arbitration eligible today. Is that a concern? And how much does that play a factor, as MLB kind of said this stuff's going to get decided while the season's going on?
Yeah, I personally don't think it's too concerning. I know, like, from a standpoint, if you see a tweet, it is, but no, I think it's just to settle their salaries for 2022. And look, I mean, those guys probably feel like they are owed maybe more because of their postseason contributions, whatever. I don't know how they factor all that stuff in, but just to settle their 2022 salaries, I think the culture around the Braves is strong enough that this really shouldn't ruffle any feathers too much. Now, I don't know. We haven't heard from any of those guys specifically yet, but I think this sort of thing will just get figured out throughout the season. But I think that it's a lot more routine than people think if they're reading some news about that.
Justin Toscano, finally, Justin, who are some of the battles to watch? I know on a team that won the World Series and expect to contend may not be a lot of them, but who are some guys to watch for the next 2 weeks here for spring training?
Yeah, well, the most important one's actually the back two spots, or I guess it could be three to begin the season of the rotation. You've got guys like Kyle Muller, Kyle Wright, Huascar Ynoa, Tuki Toussaint, guys like that kind of fighting for those final spots. And then I think that's going to be an interesting competition because I really thought the Braves needed to bring in another impact starter. And they thought so too, and that's what they were trying to do, but they haven't found one yet to their liking on the trade market or in free agency, which is why they did the next best thing in their eyes, which was fortify the bullpen with Kenley Jansen. And so, that's going to be an interesting back end of the rotation, position battle. It's really the only one you have going on, unless you want to count, what they do with outfield depth and things like that. But I think that rotation is going to be one to watch, especially because you have three guys who are pretty much locks on one end of the spectrum, and then a lot of questions on the other. So we'll see how it goes. But like we said earlier, it's definitely not as bad of an outlook as it would be, if they hadn't fortified the bullpen with Kenley Jansen and Colin McHugh. And don't forget about Darren O'Day, who's in camp and could make the team. Looks like he might make the team. And so, that's that back end of the rotation is probably really the thing to watch with those guys.
Justin Toscano covers the Braves, AJC.com. Justin, great having you on the show. Welcome to Braves country. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Justin Toscano joining us here on 3 and Out as the Braves rocking and rolling there at spring training. We'll come back. Chris Gordy, speaking of rocking and rolling, spring practices underway around the SEC. We're talking SEC football with Chris Gordy next here on 3 and Out. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, Ben Troop. Glad you're making us a part of your day. Spring practices all across the SEC. A lot of spring storylines out there. And joining us here from the Locked On SEC podcast, Chris Gordy steps in here on 3 and Out. Chris, welcome. How are you? Chris, good to have you on the show. Let's start there at Georgia, defending national champs. Back at it there in Athens. Where do you see Georgia? Is this a reload situation? Expected to lose a lot of guys to the National Football League. Are they ready to reload, or are there going to be some big questions there on especially the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely questions there on the defensive side when you lose as many guys as you did. But, man, talking with Matt Stinchcomb last week, I know he's excited with a lot of the guys. He was talking with a lot of guys at the pro day saying, oh, yeah, watch out for this guy, this guy, this guy. So, yeah, I think they're going to reload. I think the defense, maybe not as good, but they're still going to be good. But, guys, I mean, I call me crazy, but I just have some questions about the offense. Rolling with another season of Stetson Bennett. Look, we love the story. We love what he did. And winning that national championship game the way they did, an amazing fourth quarter, I just thought that was a perfect way for him to walk off into the sunset and say, hey, let's go back to JT Daniels, or let's check out one of these 4-star, 5-star quarterbacks and move forward. I just have big question marks about sticking with Stetson for another year. Can he go, undefeated or one-loss season? I just have some big question marks about him, just because I think he's limited. No disrespect to him, and he'll always be remembered for what he did for Georgia last year. But man, it could really sour what his legacy was this past year if he has a down year this year.
But Chris, can you look at that production from Stetson Bennett last year? And I think he finished in the top 5 in the country in passer rating, up near 30 touchdown passes. I mean, has he proven that he is a guy that can help Georgia win a national championship, as he did, even if he wasn't a 5-star recruit, or maybe isn't, 6'3", 6'4", et cetera?
Put it this way: he's the safe play, right? I mean, I'm trying not to come across as negative. It's not a bad thing. There are plenty of teams around this conference and around the country that would love to have a Stetson Bennett starting for them. So don't get me wrong. I just feel like, man, what we've seen at Alabama, the Bryce Youngs, the Tuas, LSU with Joe Burrow, all these big-time quarterbacks getting it done, 300, 400-yard days, 4 passing touchdowns, 5 passing touchdowns. I just think Stetson Bennett's never going to be that guy. He'll be the guy who throw for 220 and, 2 touchdowns. He'll run for 1. I mean, he's the safe guy. I just thought that Georgia might want to try to jump into the 21st century with a big-time arm and a big-time passer and get this offense going, because, I mean, let's be real. Brock Bowers is great, but, he shouldn't be your leading receiver. Georgia's bringing in these 4-star and 5-star receivers that should be having 1,000-yard seasons. Let's be real. So that's just where I am with it. Again, I'm not trying to hate on him, and I think it's safe. Kirby will be fine, but if we look back at the end of the year and Georgia's got 2-3 losses, I won't be saying I told you so, but man, I just feel like this was their opportunity to turn the page and have a more up-tempo, air-it-out offense. But they're going to be a little bit more balanced. They're going to run the ball a lot, and Stetson's going to make some great throws because he's accurate. But I just think at the end of the day, it's more safe than trying to take that chance to say, let's go be a blazing offense next year.
And Chris, I mean, regardless of how Stetson Bennett does this season, as you mentioned, I mean, he's going to make quality throws to a guy like Brock Bowers, who was a leading receiver last year. But at a certain point, how much does it, negatively affect your recruiting in the quarterback room? Because these guys that are watching that want to be Georgia Bulldogs are saying, well, listen, I want to play there, but it seems to be y'all best quarterback the last, 7 years wasn't even a 1-star, 2-star, wasn't even on you guys' radar. You asked him to come back to campus.
Yeah, I mean, the JT Daniels thing was interesting. I mean, I know he's in the portal, and I have a buddy in Missouri who keeps telling me he's coming to Mizzou. So we'll see what happens with him. But no, I mean, when you talk about the Brock Vandergrifts and these big time quarterbacks they've brought in, can you keep recruiting those guys when you stand by a Stetson Bennett and everybody's kind of looking around the room going, well, when's my turn to start? When do I get a chance? So. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Georgia's still recruiting at an incredible clip. I saw yesterday that he picked up a 4-star DB for the class of 2024 already. I mean, they're always going to recruit well with Kirby. It's just, like I said, there was a few years back where Saban was, had been running with the A.J. McCarrons and I forget the kid's name, a transfer from Florida State. It was kind of just, it was mediocre to good quarterback play. And then it just jumped forward when you got the Tuas and you got obviously Bryce Young there now, and Alabama's operating in the elite level where they'll always have a big 5-star number 1 overall quarterback at the helm. And I just thought this was a chance for Georgia to kind of turn the page because, again, I hate to live in the past, but we can say that if Alabama's playing with their full arsenal wide receivers in the national championship, it's probably a loss for Georgia.
Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast. So is that being said, does that mean it's Nick Saban and Alabama favorite to win the national championship because they lost it last year? So by just the way it pans out, he's got to win it this year. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I hate it. I mean, I like covering the full SEC, and I always say this, whenever I hate on Alabama, I got 13 other fan bases that are listening to my podcast that want to see bad things happen for Alabama. But a few years ago, I tried to be fun and pick different teams and say, I think it's this team's year and that team's year. I mean, I picked Georgia to win the championship last year. I thought it was going to be their year, but man, it just feels like you're an idiot if you're not picking Alabama to win it every year because it seems like it's the easy go-to because if Saban's not winning it, he's at least competing for it, making the playoff or, in last year's example, literally playing in the title game. So, I mean, again, Alabama's got a lot of new pieces that they got to figure out, but man, did they kill it in the transfer portal. You bring in Eli Ricks from LSU, who's going to be one of your starting DBs. You bring in Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back from Georgia Tech. He's probably going to step right in and start. And then, you go get, wide receiver from Georgia who comes in, and he's going to be a stud too. So it's, I hate to say it, but yeah, Alabama's going to be right back in there. But they got to figure out some things on their offensive line because that was the first time down the stretch of last year that Alabama's offensive line had big holes. And then they lose Evan Neal, who was their best O-lineman. They got to figure that out because, look, Bryce Young was running for his life, particularly in that national championship game. Now, kudos to him. He was still able to make the throws, get the ball off, and throw an accurate ball. But, man, you don't want Bryce Young running for his life again this year. You need that protection in front of him.
High expectations for Texas A&M once again. I know you said you're done picking against Alabama, but how good can Texas A&M be? Are they a playoff contender this fall?
It all comes down to the quarterback, guys. I mean, this has been the story for A&M since Johnny Manziel left. They've had stud running backs. They've had some good defenses, but ultimately it comes down to that quarterback play. And Jimbo is kind of in that Kirby mentality where it's we'd like a game manager back there. We're going to have a lot of play action. We're going to run the ball a lot and dump it to our tight ends and all that. But, man, it depends on who wins that spot for them. Because you look at A&M last year, they finally break through. They beat Alabama, but it was all for naught because they lost to, a couple other teams in the conference, and you didn't even compete for the West. So, yeah, this is put up or shut up time, in my opinion, for Jimbo. Like, we keep talking about him as a top-tier coach and one of the best coaches in the SEC and all this, but man, eventually you got to break through and win it. You realize, guys, A&M's been in the SEC a decade now, and they have not even won the West. Like, that's insanity to me that we keep putting Texas A&M as a preseason number 6 and preseason top 10. We got to stop because if they don't break through and finally win, the conference that they play in, I mean, what are we doing?
And Chris, keeping it in the West, speaking of teams that got to break through, Coach Kelly, LSU, we seen far removed from that 2019 team. What is LSU? How's LSU looking going into this spring, man? And they got their own problems to deal with, not named Alabama to Texas A&M, but, what are the storylines, down there in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, if you're going to LSU spring game, you better have a roster handy because you are going to be looking around at this team going, who the hell is this? Who's this guy? Because they hit up the transfer portal. Them and Ole Miss, more than anybody in the SEC, have brought in guys through the transfer portal, and it's all guys that are going to play this year. I think the pressure's kind of off Brian Kelly in year one. I think, people kind of expect this team was gutted. We saw, they played with like 20 scholarship kids in the bowl game against Kansas State. They got obliterated. They started a wide receiver at quarterback. So, yeah, there are big problems at LSU, but basically what they're trying to do is set a foundation moving forward. They want to get back to having dominant O-line and D-line play like they used to. Obviously, one of Brian Kelly's hallmarks when he was at Notre Dame was having dominant offensive line play. So I think they're going to get back to that. They'll be fine this year. They may win, 7, 8 games, and it's improvement from where they were last year. But I don't think LSU is going to compete this year. But you never know. Miles Brennan is their quarterback. They bring in Jaden Daniels from Arizona State, who somebody said to me, Jaden Daniels ain't coming in there to back up Miles Brennan. He's coming in there to start. I know that Mike Denbrock, the new offensive coordinator, there's been some parallels to Desmond Ridder with Jaden Daniels, saying that they think he could be, what he was at Cincinnati last year with Mike Denbrock. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. I think a lot depends on that opening game. LSU opens with Florida State in New Orleans in the Superdome to start the season. If LSU can win that one, yeah, I think they can go 500 in the SEC and have a nice year. But, man, it would certainly put a bad taste in their mouth if they open the year with a loss to Florida State in, the non-conference play. And then you still have a whole SEC slate to play. But, yeah, I think pressure is off Brian Kelly. At least in year one, they'll give him a little time to settle in.
Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast, joining us here on 3 and Out. Chris, a couple of programs in the West. Make sure to get your thoughts of, I know it's the West and it's tough, but have we kind of seen peak what they're going to be able to do? Sam Pittman in Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Is there more to get out of those programs? Or are they kind of topping out at what we can expect them to do as long as Nick Saban is out there, as long as Texas A&M is dropping money like they're dropping?
I think Arkansas is a player, but all of it, to me, hinges on KJ Jefferson. KJ Jefferson was a good quarterback in the SEC last year. He made game-winning plays for his team. When they needed a fourth-quarter drive to go win a game, KJ Jefferson did it. But there were too many games when I look back at the box score after the game was over, and I'm like, man, KJ Jefferson only threw for 130 yards? Like, there were just those games where you looked and went, man, if he'd have done more earlier, maybe they wouldn't have been in this position in the fourth quarter where they needed a drive to go win it. So I say all that to say, KJ Jefferson 2 years ago had games where, he got a game, I think it was against Missouri, they started, he threw for like 300 yards and was slinging it around the field. I want to see that KJ Jefferson this year. If he can take that leap forward in his development, and, he's been in this Kendall Brown system for a couple of years. If he can take that step forward, and we're seeing him throw for 250, 275, a handful of touchdowns a week. Remember, they're getting a big wide receiver transferring in from Oklahoma. Like, I think if they can get that offense going, look out, man, because Sam Pittman, he's got the O-line, the D-line playing well. I think the defense is going to be just fine. So Arkansas could be – everybody's talking about A&M. No, watch out for Arkansas, because if KJ Jefferson improves, they might be the dark horse in the West.
Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast, our guest here on 3 and Out. Chris, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
Chris Gordy joining us here on 3 and Out. We'll come back. We'll hear from Dave Archer. Matt Ryan out in Atlanta. Where do the Falcons go from here? He joins us next here on 3 and Out.